Gentlemen, welcome to the briefing room. This game can give you plenty of different experiences, from helicopters to jets and tanks and ships, as well as many different game modes, including Enduring Confrontations, or EC, the mode played within the simulator section of War Thunder. Now, EC is wildly different from the other game modes within the game for many reasons, but it is the one that feels the differences in battle ratings and tiers the most as you progress through the game. And I'm not just talking about that surveillance F-86 that's somehow pushing Mach at 8.0. I'm talking about some of the more basic stuff, like all the way down to how you spot people. And because those changes are so different depending on the tier, it makes it very important to understand the differences as you enter War Thunder Sim or decide to progress even further. And that's what this video aims to do. To highlight the differences between the tiers, compare them, contrast them, and yes, even let you know which one I think is better. So let's hop into it. Or this. The first thing you have to understand about these tiers is that they are both contradictory. And hear me out on this. Those lower tiers are going to be flying aircraft that can barely breach 120 knots. However, the fights, when you find them, are going to be chaotic. Jets are the exact opposite. Incredibly fast, but you'll find a lot more methodical dogfights within the top tier. Now, experienced players will know that all of those have caveats to them, so let's dig even deeper. I'll start with some of my personal thoughts on how the early game and the first tier in War Thunder Sim brackets plays out most of the time, and then we'll move on to talk about the higher tier stuff and really be able to compare it. If you already know about the lower tiers, you can skip to the timestamp I have on screen. That's a comparison. But let's get into it. The early game in War Thunder throws you into aircraft like the P-26, the HE-51, the H-123, and other types of early monoplane and late biplanes. Now, as you already know, these planes are slower than a snail hill climb. However, the map size still remains quite large. And yes, there are some smaller maps which will squeeze players together. Maps like Tunisia and Zhangzhou, and I'm definitely not pronouncing that right. But do you think new players really understand the intricacies and details of the maps already? No, absolutely not. But training, what if I'm not a new player? Here's why it matters. The people playing at these lower tiers likely are newer players who don't understand those things about the maps and will fill up servers like a Denmark and a Dover Strait, which, unless you have a kink for wasting time, I would avoid like the plague. The other problem with these early tiers is about how the battle rating system distributes who is allowed into the game, meaning it's typically reserve aircraft and 1.0 aircraft that go up against 2.0 to 2.3 birds. Now, the difference for a reserve aircraft, even to a 1.7 aircraft, has to be some of the most drastic differences in performance in the entirety of War Thunder when looking at related tiers. And add in the fact that most of these low tiers do not have aircraft capable of being trimmed. Many of these aircraft are the ones who would benefit the most from being able to be trimmed, with their light interwar fighters with some decently powerful engines considering the weight of the aircraft. They also produce a ton of lift with those double wings, and aircraft will just do loops when you let go of the controls. I'm thinking of you, I-15. Not having elevator trim or rudder trim on these aircraft makes flying them and attempting to take off with them kind of a bitch. It's so much of a hassle that I challenge you right now. Go and do this. Go hop into an early sim match in War Thunder and just take a look at the bonfires happening at every airfield on the map. Those are all the corpses of new players, believing that this is where they're gonna get their start, and it's just too difficult. They probably won't even come back to the game mode. And I know this is a lot of shade being thrown towards the early game of War Thunder Sim, but believe me, I truly love the tier. What I don't love is that War Thunder treats it like the other game modes, where these aircraft are the entry-level spot that will be the best for new players to get a hang of the fighting and the flying. When I say I love this tier, I mean I love the dogfight. I love how close everything is, how tangible it is, how little damage your guns do, and how focused you need to be to keep your fire, despite the aircraft being really difficult to control at times. The visibility is amazing with your head, usually halfway down the fuselage, and your neck and shoulders completely exposed to the elements. It's an awesome feeling, especially in VR. But the fact is that none of that matters if you can't make it off the ground and have enough patience to fly very slowly across an entire battlefield. And hey, I'm not a stan for top tier stuff too much either, but if we're gonna do a comparison, we do have to highlight some things that each tier can do better. Now, one of the things I've talked about is how tangible everything feels, how lively everything feels when you're flying one of these biplanes, and that includes the ground battles around you. So people are going to try and attempt to bomb and shoot ground targets, which can be very effective and enjoyable, especially in groups. However, your slow speeds do make you very susceptible to ground fire, more so than any BR in the game, especially if you're not paying attention or don't know what some units can do. And remember, when you get shot down, you have quite a long flight. So expecting new players or people who are new to the tier to be this patient already is kind of a high bar. These aircraft are also happening in an era where the bomber reigned supreme. This was a time when the idea that the bomber would always make it through was widespread. And that does have a reason behind it. It's because gunners had a much easier job back then, when the aircraft were slow and kind of a big target with the double wings. So attacking AI bombers at the low tier is going to be a pain. But again, I must say that if you are a new player and are able to overcome all of these things in the low tier, really tough it out, you will become a good player at almost any tier. My one complaint is that due to the speed of the aircraft, you will likely waste a lot of your own time and can become experienced way more effectively in tiers with faster aircraft. And speaking of faster aircraft, and I do mean much faster, let's talk about jets. They've been getting off a little too scot-free here, and besides their speed, the main difference we're now going to have with jets and top tier aircraft is the ranges at which they can exchange fire with each other. And that's due to missiles, especially these Fox 3 and longer range radar-based missiles. And because of these, the conversation about the maps completely flips. It is now no longer in your best interest to choose small maps, where you're risking to be engaged directly off of takeoff, which is just, it's no fun. Best matches are definitely when you can have a little bit of time to yourself, set up, make a plan, and then enter the fight. So larger maps, still not like Denmark, you Denmark, but ones like Sinai, Afghanistan, Rocky Canyon, all of these, which would be an early tier blacklist, now become craved because of their size and their topography. Now, the reason I say I dislike Denmark is actually not because of its size, but because of its very poor topography. It's very flat. For a match where you're going to be slinging missiles at each other from 60 miles away, that's a bad thing. You want places where you can take cover, even just for gameplay reasons. For biplanes, it's most likely preferred to have flat land, so you can spot people from further ranges. For jets, it's more preferred to have mountains for the reason I just stated. But training, if that's true, how are we going to see each other if there's mountains? That's where radar comes in, which is another massive difference between the tiers. Bouncing radar waves off of other aircraft is going to tell you where other aircraft are, as well as your friendlies. Available in your HUD is one of the main reasons why an argument for starting at top tier may actually be stronger than an argument for those who would like to start at early tiers when it comes to War Thunder Sim. You also have the ability at these higher tiers to choose aircraft that are going to fit a more noob-friendly playstyle. For example, American aircraft with long range and very potent Fox 3 missiles are kind of a saving grace for those who just do not know how to shoot with the gun. But that's only on one side of the coin. When we talk about biplanes, we also have to talk about the ability to hear other aircraft. I know this ability has been decreased in recent updates, however, it certainly beats catching a Fox 2 that gives zero warning and is completely invisible to the eye of a player up at top tier. Being killed repeatedly by systems you don't understand, don't know where they're coming from, and are sometimes impossible to counter can make top tier at any experience level quite frustrating. And I would be a fool to not also talk about the economics of top tier versus low tier. Now, I'm not necessarily going to talk about the price of some of those top tier premiums, but Jesus, I'm not going to highlight them too much because a lot of people get into these. And the reason I'm not going to talk about them too much is that a lot of people who get into sim are those who have already played arcade or realistic for quite a while and have a lot of this stuff already unlocked. They just want a new experience. But for a completely newer player, this is much more of a hurdle because your free game is now $70 bare minimum to get just one plane that you may not even enjoy in a mode that you may not even understand. And that's just the entry price. The time it takes to unlock just modifications at top tier is downright criminal, and the price for dying will make you wish you were down at 1-0. Is this economically a good environment to learn the game? Probably not. And just as I did for the biplanes, I also have to admit that the fight when you get into them and people actually go into the merge with you are very fun. At top tier, the fights are more rock, paper, scissors than how a biplane fight usually plays out. Skill after the merge is one of the most important factors up here, especially when it comes to getting those high AOA shots with your gun, or even the high off-bore sight missile shots, although some of them are kind of egregious. Those fights, though, especially when they get floaty, do tend to last for quite a while. They're very intense and are incredibly fun. In the controllability department, the aircraft at top tier are unrivaled. They literally have computers in them to auto-level and dampen your movement so you don't do something stupid and crash out, which is very easy at low tier. Now, the great news at this higher tier is that the games are almost always filled. On almost any given day of the week, you're able to go online, find servers at top tier with maps that are enjoyable and are going to have players in them on both sides. Now, these players do have a higher chance of being very well experienced than if you were to play at lower tier, but that's just the cost of doing business. Question is, can you afford that cost of business after you've died to them 18 times with how the economics is? I don't know. That's a question you'll have to answer. Now, a good way to make up that money that you've lost from air-to-air fighting is by potentially doing air-to-ground. Top tier sim and the tier almost directly beneath it has an entire community of air-to-ground players who fly things like the A-10, the Su-39, Su-37, who have never shot at an aircraft in their lives. These players are kind of the piñatas for air-to-air guys. However, if played correctly and sneakily, they can be used to wipe out an entire battlefield with just a single flight from a very far range, meaning the threat that you would have faced doing the same thing at lower tiers is completely avoidable at the high one, and your aircraft can carry way more ordnance. These attacker aircraft are very fun, especially that 30mm on the A-10, Buddy Gobert. It's genuinely a fantastic way of softly introducing yourself to all of the systems and countermeasures and all of the stuff you gotta worry about up at top tier, while also maintaining an effect on the battlefield that'll keep your morale up, because you feel like you're doing something, and you are. The issue will be one day breaking out of that shell you've created and actually trying some air-to-air fights, but it's all about what you feel comfortable with, and what you think is the most fun. That's really the main point of all of this. Make sure you're having fun wherever you choose. It is a video game. Make sure you enjoy your time while you're playing it. So what do we get from this video so far? What is the conclusion here? And here it is. You can quote me on this. The gap of information needed to play effectively at low tiers is very low. However, the skill of the pilot will shine brightest at this lower tier. For jets, that equation is flipped on its head. It is, and let's be honest here, kind of a shitter tier. You are fully capable of being an effective player by sitting at 30,000 feet and answering the phone whenever you hear it ring. It can be just as simple as a push and play game with some aircraft, but in order to even do that, you need to overcome the incredibly large information gap that the high tier has. There is no wonder why there's so many guides on how to use radar missiles, how to control all the different modes for flying, controlling your bombs, and switching between HUD elements to see your friendlies before you shove a Fox 2 up their tailpipe. It is because it is complicated to learn. It will be expensive to do so in a live match. Early tier sim will be slow to get into fights. It will be more rare to enter fights, but when you do, they will be incredibly chaotic. Your aircraft will be difficult to control, but the fights themselves are incredibly rewarding. High tier has a tendency to get into fights fairly quickly, and for those fights to become more drawn out past the merge. This can leave a feeling of intensity and drama in the dogfight. Your aircraft will be very easy to fly. However, the fights on both sides of winning and losing feel as though they've been watered down a little bit. There's something about getting schwacked by a missile you can't see that's already done a full circle after it's missed you once just to knock out your pilot in one hit. Doesn't exactly feel totally skillful. Because of this, new players can excel faster once they get over that information gap. Is that to say that experienced players won't have an edge or can't perform better than these players because of the technology available? Obviously no, but those are some of the differences. It should just be noted that losing, again, will be very expensive, but what you're paying for in gameplay, consistent servers, just raw power of the aircraft, is probably worth it. So look, if a new player were to come up to me and ask whether they should start in the early game of War Thunder Sim or move straight to top tier, my answer, honest and truly, would be you're fucking nuts. Neither of these tiers are good for new players. The best way to approach learning Sim is like 2-3 to 4-7, throw yourself in there, learn the dogfight, or go into Korea era jets where the fights are really drawn out and you will learn geometry incredibly well. But if you made me choose 100% between the two, it does have to be top tier. The ability to do very well after you've understood the mechanics, key bindings, and the technology is available more frequently and faster in the high tier than it is at the far, far low tier. That means that low tier is the last tier that I would ever recommend somebody to start with in Sim, especially these reserve aircraft. Are they very fun when you find a good server of good players? Yes, but the amount of times that you actually get into these games and it's just people roasting marshmallows around noobs' corpses on the runways is frankly disturbing. What War Thunder does is impressive. It's important to recognize that. It's very rare to have a game which completely flips the characteristics of itself and its gameplay based on the vehicle that you choose. Let me know what you guys think about this comparison, whether you enjoy it, whether you agree with it, whether you have your own thoughts about the subject, and if you are a new player here looking to get into the game, please check out my guide right here for recommended aircraft. You can find it in the Discord down below. These are the aircraft that I think would benefit you the most to start off with in Sim. Notice it does not recognize early tier stuff or late tier stuff within this guide, because I would not recommend them to start off with. But if you do decide that top tier is where you would like to begin, please take a look at my missile evasion guide. It is going to drastically improve your first impressions of the game mode and the tier. I did have special guest Nimbal come and do a whole section, and if you're interested in flying up there at those higher tier stuff, I would very much recommend that you go and follow him. But yes, those are my personal thoughts. Let me know what you think down below. Guys, like, subscribe, do the YouTube thing. I'll catch you on the next one. Adios.